Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist congregation of Terre, Haute. This congregation welcomes all people, regardless of their age, religion, race, nationality, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or anything else that has been used to divide people. We are a group of people with our own opinions, our own ideas, our own dreams, but we share ideals. We share a common belief in a liberal religion. In our discussions, we may disagree with each other, but we must always remember that what unites us is stronger than what separates us. We must always end the service aware of the love that we have for each other.
Sunday we reflect on our principles, and this Sunday we're looking at our fifth principle. In our religious lives, the democratic process requires trust in the development of each individual conscience, a belief that such development is possible for each of us, as well as a commitment to cultivate our own conscience. We could call it a commitment to the value of each person. In the words of Theodore Parker, democracy means not I am as good as you are, but you are as good as I am. My connection with the sacred is only as precious as my willingness to acknowledge the same connection in others. That was Reverend Parisa Parsa, Executive Director of the Public Conversations Project. Our opening words on the insert, you see, number 1, teaching your children about God. A woman once stood before God, her heart breaking from the pain and injustice in the world. "Dear God," she cried out, "look at all the suffering, the anguish and distress in your world. Why don't you send help?" And God responded, "I did. I sent you." That was from the Rabbi David J. Wolpe. Our opening hymn, which is number 336.
With their
Our transitional words, why forgive? Forgiveness is a door to peace and happiness. It's a small, narrow door and cannot be entered without stooping. It is also hard to find, but no matter how long the search, it can be found. When we forgive someone for a mistake or a deliberate hurt, we still recognize it as such, but instead of lashing out or biting back, we attempt to see beyond it so as to restore our relationship with the person responsible for it. Our forgiveness may not take away our pain. It may not even be acknowledged or accepted. Yet the act of offering it will keep us from being sucked into the downward spiral of resentment. It will also guard us against the temptation of taking out our anger or hurt on someone else. Forgiveness does not mean ignoring what has been done or putting a false label on an evil act. It means rather that the evil act no longer remains as a barrier to the relationship. Forgiveness is a catalyst creating the atmosphere necessary for a fresh start and a new beginning. Johann Christoph Arnold. Today, our speaker is Betsy Frank, and she's been a leader of the community for many years, and I've known her throughout several different organizations. She's a member of the Hebrew congregation as well as a member of the nursing department at ISU. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about the Jewish High Holy Days.
In the Jewish calendar, Hebrew calendar, the 10 holiest days of the year have just finished. And now we go on to Sukkot, one of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, which begins at sundown on Monday. And our sukkah is supposed to be constructed as I speak and ends with Simchat Torah at sundown on September 28th. And this is when we finish the cycle of Torah readings and then begin again. And this is from our morning service on Yom Kippur. On Rosh Hashanah, we reflect. On Yom Kippur, we consider. This is really tough stuff. Who shall live for the sake of others? Who dying shall leave a heritage of life? Who shall burn with the fires of greed? Who shall drown in the waters of despair? Whose hunger shall be for the good? Who shall thirst for justice and right? Whose tongue shall be a thrusting sword? Whose words shall make for peace? Who shall be plagued by the fear of the world? Who shall strangle for lack of friends? Who shall rest at the end of the day? Who lies sleepless on a bed of pain? Who shall go forth in the quest for truth? Who shall be locked in the prison for self? Who shall be serene in every storm? Who shall be troubled by the passing breeze? Who shall be poor in the midst of possessions? Who shall be rich, content with their lot? Repentance, prayer, and charity, these return us to our God. Forgiven the past, renewed for tomorrow, may we go forth with rejoicing to a year of great goodness. And later on, there's another version of who shall live, who shall die by plague. And I'm going, oh, this is not good, since we're in the midst of it. The High Holy Days are a time of reflection and a time to begin anew. It's almost like Lent on steroids, I think, about if you really do it right. Yet our prayers recognize that we're not likely to achieve all that we set out to do. Rosh Hashanah is considered the Jewish New Year, but actually is the 7th month in the Hebrew calendar. The first is Nisan, the month that Passover occurs. And the Torah states that Nisan is the first month. But in the Mishnah, which then there's the commentary on the Gemara, which becomes the Talmud, and it's very complex, written around 200 in the Common Era, is when the first of Tishrei was designated at the beginning of the year for sabbatical cycles in the Jubilee. And in Israel this year is the sabbatical year, which means you're not supposed to grow anything. Nehemiah also mentions the first of Tishrei when the book of law or Torah was read. And perhaps it wasn't initially designated as the new year, but like all holidays, there were pagan celebrations, and so the Israelites and other people made it fit. It's like Christmas, which goes along with Saturnalia. And the sages of the Talmud also disagree. They disagree about everything. I'm doing a daily Talmud study that lasts 7 years, and nobody agrees with anybody, and then they just say, this is so. So, and we should do that sometime. I don't care, this is what it is. And they disagreed whether the first of Nisan or the first of Tishrei was the new year. One sage said Nisan was the date of the new year of kings, and it's when the Israelites escaped from Egypt, which is what Passover celebrates. Another sage says it was Tishrei because this was the anniversary of Adam's birth, so the birth of all humanity. In fact, sometimes we refer to Rosh Hashanah as the birthday of the world. And if you want a more complete discussion of this, which I will not bore you with, you can look on myjewishlearning.com for a more complete discussion. And there are two additional New Years besides the two I just mentioned. There is the month of Shavat on the 15th is the New Year of the trees. And then the first of Elul, the month before Tishrei, is the New Year for tithing of animals. And this goes back to the temple sacrifices, which, oh my. And during this month, we prepare for the high holy days. So the whole thing is 40 days, actually. The shofar is blown daily, not in our congregation, but in many congregations. And many rabbis this past couple of years have been posting reflections daily on Facebook to prepare us for the holiest time of the year. With Rosh Hashanah, we begin deep reflection and penance with the goal of transforming ourselves for the coming year. We wish you on Rosh Hashanah, wish you a sweet year, Lashana Tova, and then we say between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur that we wish to be inscribed in the book of life. And let me tell you, as I get older, when I read that, it causes me to take pause. Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. One is supposed to fast for 24 hours. And it's supposed to help us focus on the prayers to help us transform ourselves and start anew. Unfortunately, I can no longer fast, and many in our congregation can't. We're all pretty old. And as president of our small congregation, I have to be tech support for our MacGyver setup. It's so different than yours. We have my laptop sitting on a little table. We have a camera that costs $26 from Amazon, and it's faced on the pulpit. And then we have a Yeti mic that costs $100. And then we have speakers, so for people on Zoom who are reading, the rest of the people can hear it. We do our services on Zoom, sometimes just totally on Zoom, but for the high holy days. And now most of our Friday nights are a combination of Zoom and live, except when our one member from Virginia, who's very supportive, does services, and it's only going to be on Zoom. And people frankly like it. Especially when we have our study sessions when the student rabbi's here. You know, who necessarily wants to get up and go somewhere? You can be home in your jammies and have a wonderful study sessions. As with all Jewish holidays, Yom Kippur begins at sundown. The central prayer for the evening service is Kol Nidre, which is chanted, and the translation is, "Let all our vows and oaths, all the promises we make, and the obligations we incur to you, O God, between this Yom Kippur and the next, be null and void should we, after honest effort, find ourselves unable to fulfill them. Then may we be absolved of them. This prayer is a recognition that as imperfect human beings, we know that God will forgive. And there's lots of examples of this in the Hebrew Bible. We must also ask forgiveness from other human beings we have wronged, and that was some of the readings that I sent, which I did not find on my own. It was on a listserv that came to me, and I went, oh, this is pretty good. I probably could use some of this. And this, our sins are many, but focus on our relationships. And we recite these sins several times during the service. By the time you're done, you know them all. The sins include slander, sexual impropriety, and we say this out loud: narrow-mindedness, insolence, hypocrisy, doing evil. Then we recite sins another time of not taking care of the earth, ignoring the poor. And then there are sins against ourselves by not doing the best we can. And the sins are focused on relationships with God, the world around us, and relationships with others and ourselves. And I'd like to read a couple of the litany, and you'll see what I mean. It will take me a minute to find it. In fact, there are this whole litany in the morning service that goes through failures of truth, including for passing judgment without knowledge of the facts and for distorting facts to fit our theories. I think we all do that. For deceiving ourselves and others with half-truths. For condemning in our children the faults we tolerate in our own. Failures of justice, for turning a deaf ear to the cry of the oppressed, for using violence to bring about change, for the sin of peace, for waging aggressive war, and for the sin of appeasing aggressors, for poisoning the air and polluting land and sea, and for all the evil means we employ to accomplish good ends. I mean, this is heavy stuff. Failures of love, for confusing love with lust, for pursuing fleeting pleasure at the cost of lasting hurt. And then it says, teach us to forgive ourselves for all these sins, O forgiving God, and help us to overcome them. And then for all the sins, God of mercy, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement. And we say these things several times throughout the day so that we wouldn't forget. So can one really transform? Personally, I know it's a lifelong quest. I try each year to make small changes in my relationships, but alas, not totally successful. And I remember this from a couple years ago. I tend to be impatient. And so I made this, okay, this is one of the things I want to work on. So on the way home, I mean, we're talking after a whole day, we've cleaned up from break the fast, etc. And there was this driver that was being not what I would like. And I just let out a word and I went, oh, you didn't even get 5 minutes away. But should we give up? No, we shouldn't delay trying. Regina Brett, who is one of my favorite columnists in the Cleveland Jewish News, says, life doesn't change for you to love it. You have to change and love life as it is. And there's a story about Reb Murray that I'd like to share with you. 88 years old, and I'm not going to read it word for word, but I think he has lessons for us. Quiet, sometimes reserved, Murray, the man that's writing this, the rabbi that's writing this, became my father-in-law 31 years ago when God whispered to me, don't wait. He grew up in Brooklyn. the only child of a father who died so young that Murray had few memories of him, and this wasn't uncommon in those days, and a mother, Ethel, who had the strength to clean floors to make a living. His family had so little that on a trip to revisit the Brooklyn of his childhood, he told us he needed only to visit a few places, as his family never had the means to go anywhere that far from home. And think of all the kids here in Terre, Haute, families that don't go beyond the blocks where they live, go to school, go to the store. He joined the Army, and there as a medic, he learned to drive, would you believe, practicing in ambulances. Then on a weekend trip to Los Angeles, he was introduced to someone who eventually became his wife, and they raised 3 children, had 5 grandchildren, and they had a retail craft store. But then his wife had multiple issues, from agoraphobia, which means you don't want to go out at all, multiple sclerosis. He took care of her and found ways to explore the world around her. On days when her discomfort kept her home, Murray was both by her side and out in the world. And she took the lead and he just followed. For some, life might shrink and expand for them. Life expanded and sometimes shrunk, but this once poor Brooklyn boy kept going. He didn't wait for everything to fall perfectly in place. I think that's very important. He adapted to new circumstances, living and loving as best he could. And then his wife died. Sometimes widowers shut down, closing themselves off, but not Murray. Heartbroken though he was, he fell back into the healthy habits he'd developed. He took walks. He'd go out with the guys for breakfast, our breakfast group, Jackie. He continued sharing life with his children, doubled down on his photography, and he accepted an invitation soon after Terre died to go with their congregation trip to Italy. We wanted to stay by his side, and we hoped that the trip would find some comfort. But what happened was amazing beyond our wildest dreams. We were a group of empty nesters, all experienced travelers, as we made our way through Italy. Murray emerged as our rock and our inspiration when the early mornings and the long bus trips began to fray our nerves. He remained patient and resolute. And if any of you that have been on tours, you know how this goes. When walking over city cobblestones tired us out, he kept going and took lots of pictures. And when the staircases ascended too steeply, he put one for the other until high above the city. And he called down to us to join him at the top. When we wanted to complain, he continued to express delight. Why? Somewhere over the course of his 88 years, Murray made a choice. Instead of succumbing to the sadness of limitations and loss, he chose hope and the promise for a new day. He refused to stop and wait for things to get better. We've all had days like that. The Unitarian, the stirring prayer our synagogues will sing, which we did sing about who shall live and who shall die. That's quite stirring. Propels us to follow Murray's lead. It says that in the face of all challenges, broken relationships, illness, financial stress, death, loss, don't stop to wait for it all to get better. Instead, repair your relationships. Or as Murray taught us in Italy and taught our family throughout his life, it means don't wait. Don't wait to say I love you. Don't wait to say I'm sorry. Don't wait to climb out of the cesspool which you have descended. Don't wait. We have a gift, which is our life. And reviewing the pictures that he had taken, he exclaimed, "It's a miracle. Maybe I'm already in heaven. I've got 3 wonderful kids and 5 beautiful grandkids. I've had 60 years waking up next to my beloved wife. I had my health. I get to travel. God did a good job. God shared goodness with me. May this be a sample of heaven. And this is from a man who buried his wife just 6 weeks before. So the High Holy Days is really about trying to transform who we are, how we look at life. And of course, I'm not an expert in all the liturgy and how it goes, but the overwhelming message is it's up to us. It's up to us. And in fact, in our Shabbat liturgy, we talk about 6 days God worked, and on the seventh, God rested from the work God had chosen to do. That means it's our responsibility to try to make things as good as we can. And we know that it's not going to be perfect. We know it's not going to be perfect, but we know that our outlook is what makes a difference. And I can think of this lovely little, fairly newborn over there. How old is he? You know, as a new parent, you think it's going to be all wonderful, and then the first couple of weeks at home, you're going, oh, what the heck did I do here? I'm getting no sleep. Is this the perfect childhood? Nah, but it will get better. So it's our outlook, and it's a lifelong quest. Thank you.
Our closing hymn is number 280. Our closing words, again with our insert. This is the day of judgment. Today we remember our deeds. This is a day of questioning, and we ask, what have we done with the gift of life? Who among you loves life and longs to enjoy good for many days? Then guard your tongue from evil and your lips from deceitful speech. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. We are made to be the crown of creation. Endowed with a portion of the divine spirit, we were commanded, walk before me and reach for perfection. We were called to hallow this work and bless it. You shall be holy, for I, the Eternal One, am holy.
May the blessings of love rest upon you. May peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore.
Go in peace. Know that you are loved and that your life